The notification on my phone screen was almost blindingly simple. Direct deposit received, $150,000. A quiet little ding that represented the loudest, most satisfying victory of my life. But to understand how I got this check, we have to go back to the beginning. For 7 years, I wasn't just an employee at Sterling & Finch. I was part of the architecture. As the senior project manager, and more accurately, the unofficial chief of everything for my boss, Jonathan Sterling, my life was a meticulously color-coded calendar of other people's emergencies. My mornings started before the sun was up, fueled by the bitter coffee from the office machine and the adrenaline of a looming deadline. I lived and breathed project timelines, client acquisitions, and budget reconciliations. My apartment was less a home and more a charging station for my body and my phone. I remember the final push for the Vanguard Initiative, our biggest account of the year. It was a 3-month-long death march. I was the one coordinating with our teams in London and Tokyo, which meant my workday never really ended. I ate takeout over my keyboard, my trackpad slick with grease from a slice of late-night pizza. I missed my sister's engagement party because a key client had a sudden urgent thought at 9 p.m. on a Saturday. I was the one who found the critical flaw in the logistics software at 3 a.m., averting a multi-million-dollar disaster, and then presented the solution at the 8 a.m. meeting as if I'd had a full 8 hours of sleep. I did it all because I believed in the work, and foolishly, I believed my dedication would be rewarded. I made Jonathan Sterling look like a genius, a rainmaker, a titan of industry. That was my real job description. The day after the Vanguard Initiative officially launched to massive success, he called me into his office. His corner suite was a monument to his ego, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a ridiculously oversized mahogany desk, and abstract art that probably cost more than my car. He was leaning back in his leather throne, feet propped up on the desk, admiring the shine on his $1,000 shoes. "Sarah, come in," he said, waving a dismissive hand without making eye contact. He was scrolling through something on his phone, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. I stood in front of his desk, my hands clasped behind my back in a posture of professional deference I'd perfected over the years. "Good morning, Jonathan. The preliminary reports from Vanguard are looking even better than we projected." "Of course they are," he said, finally lowering his phone and gracing me with his attention. "When I'm at the helm, the ship sails smoothly." He smiled, a flash of perfectly white veneers. "But a captain needs a good first mate to swab the decks. You did a sufficient job." I felt a familiar, tiny prickle of indignation. Sufficient. I had practically willed that project into existence through sheer force of will. I had sacrificed my personal life on its altar for 90 straight days. "It was a team effort, sir," I said, my voice tight. Yes, the team," he mused, steepling his fingers. "But teams are messy. They need a firm hand, direction, vision. That's where I come in." He leaned forward, his smile turning conspiratorial, as if he were letting me in on a grand secret. "You're an excellent implementer, Sarah. You take my ideas and you make them happen. It's a valuable skill. Not a leadership skill, of course, but valuable nonetheless. You make me look good." He paused, letting the backhanded compliment hang in the air between us. "That's your real talent," he continued, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "You're the ultimate assistant. You handle the noise so I can create the music." He gestured around his opulent office. "And the music is good, isn't it?" I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I wanted to list the 100 ideas that had actually been mine, the fires I'd put out that he never even knew were burning, the client relationships I'd personally saved from his abrasive arrogance. But I didn't. I just stood there and took it, because that's what I did. That was the job. I swallowed the bitterness and forced a smile. "Yes, Jonathan, the music is very good." He beamed, satisfied. "Excellent. Now could you get Brenda from accounting up here? I need to go over my expense reports for the victory dinner. And get me a coffee, Black. This one's cold." I turned and walked out, the echo of his dismissiveness following me down the hall. I didn't know it then, but it was the last coffee I would ever get for him, and his victory was about to become very, very expensive. The official bonus meeting was 2 weeks later. 2 weeks of me running on a fumes and hope cocktail, replaying his backhanded compliments but focusing on the valuable part. I'd done the math. Based on the final numbers from the Vanguard initiative and the bonus structure outlined in the initial project charter, my discretionary success bonus should have been, at minimum, $150,000. It was life-changing money. It was validation money. I walked into his office, that same monument to his ego, but this time I felt a tremor of genuine excitement. This was it, the payoff. He was on a call, laughing loudly, and motioned for me to sit in one of the 2 stiff leather chairs opposite his desk. He finished his call with a booming, "Ciao!" and spun to face me, his grin so wide it looked painful. "Sarah! The woman of the hour," he declared, pulling a slim, elegant envelope from his desk drawer. The board was ecstatic. The client is singing our praises. My praises, mostly, but you get the idea. He slid the envelope across the polished mahogany. My name was typed neatly on the front. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. This was the culmination of 7 years of missed birthdays, cold dinners, and 3 a.m. panic attacks. I could already feel the weight of it, the freedom it represented. I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. It was a standard bonus notification letter. I scanned past the corporate jargon, my eyes searching for the number, and then I found it. $15,000. I read it again, and again. The number didn't change. It was my standard, contractually obligated annual performance bonus. A pat on the head. There was no mention of the Vanguard initiative, no 6-figure success fee, just a rounding error on his expense account. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. "Jonathan," I began, my voice barely a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again, forcing strength into my words. "I think there's been a mistake. This is my standard bonus. We had discussed a project lead commission for the Vanguard initiative." He leaned back, the smile vanishing from his face, replaced by a look of clinical pity. "Discussed? Sarah, I think you're misremembering. I make the decisions on discretionary bonuses. The Vanguard bonus was designated for the visionary, the one who closed the deal and steered the ship." "I steered the ship," I said, my voice shaking with a fury I could no longer contain. "I managed every single moving part of that project across 3 continents. I caught the software flaw that would have cost us millions. My name is on every key document as senior project manager." He actually chuckled. A low, condescending sound that made my skin crawl. "You managed the logistics, yes. You were my hands and feet. And you were compensated for that with your salary. Very generously, I might add." He steepled his fingers, looking at me as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "A bonus of that magnitude, the $150,000 you're thinking of, is for leaders, for rainmakers. It's for the person whose name is on the door. It's for me." The blood drained from my face. He had taken my bonus, the money I had earned, bled for, sacrificed for. He had just allocated it to himself. I did the work. I choked out, the injustice of it, a physical weight in my chest. I earned that money. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that same confidential, venomous tone he'd used before. His eyes were cold, devoid of any empathy. "You did a job, your job. You think because you worked a few late nights, you're entitled to a piece of the real prize. That's not how the world works." He paused, letting the silence stretch, twisting the knife. "You're an excellent implementer, Sarah, but you lack the vision. You lack the killer instinct. You just don't deserve it. You don't deserve it." Those 3 words shattered something inside me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my worth, my time, my identity, all of it dismissed in a single cruel sentence. I had built his throne, and now he was telling me I wasn't even worthy to clean it. I think this is the part of the story that still gets me, the sheer, unadulterated audacity of it all. If you're just finding my story, by the way, you should probably hit subscribe because you're going to want to see how this ends. I stood up, my body feeling strangely light. disconnected. The shock had burned away, leaving behind something cold and hard and clear. I looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time, not as my boss, but as my target. The smug, self-satisfied thief sitting on a pile of money he hadn't earned. "Thank you for clarifying," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. I placed the bonus letter back on his desk, turned, and walked out of his office without another word. He had taken my money, he had taken my credit. But in that moment, he gave me something far more valuable, a purpose. He thought the music was good? I was about to compose a symphony of my own, and it was gonna be a goddamn funeral dirge. I gave myself 24 hours to cool down. One full day where I didn't let the rage consume me, where I forced myself to think not like a spurned employee but like a project manager. The problem, a resource allocation error. The objective, to correct it. My first attempt would be to go through official channels. It was the logical, professional, and hopelessly naive thing to do. I scheduled a follow-up meeting under the guise of debriefing project financials. I walked into his office a day later, a slim portfolio in my hand. It contained a copy of the project charter with the bonus structure highlighted, a summary of my key contributions with supporting emails, and a timeline of the 3 a.m. software fix that had saved the entire initiative. It was my case, presented logically and dispassionately. "Jonathan," I began, sitting in the same leather chair as before, "thank you for seeing me. I've had some time to reflect, and I wanted to approach the bonus issue again, formally. I believe there's been a significant oversight, and I've prepared some documentation to clarify my role and contributions." I placed the portfolio on his desk. He didn't even glance at it. He just stared at me, a strange, almost bored curiosity in his eyes, as if observing a peculiar insect. I pressed on, my voice steady. "The project charter outlines a bonus pool for key leadership. As senior project manager, running point across 3 global offices, and personally managing the crisis aversion, my role was unequivocally a leadership position. My 7 years of loyalty to this firm and the direct line you can draw from my work to the project's profitability supports this." I took a breath. Legally and logically, the discretionary bonus I was led to expect is warranted. I'm just asking you to make it right. For a moment, there was only silence. He leaned forward, picked up my carefully prepared portfolio, and fanned himself with it like it was a cheap paper fan. Then he tossed it onto the corner of his desk, where it slid and knocked over a silver pen holder. And then he laughed. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a deep, genuine belly laugh. He threw his head back and roared, the sound bouncing off the glass walls of his shrine to himself. It was the most humiliating sound I had ever heard. "Oh my God," he finally gasped, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye. "You brought homework. You actually brought homework." He shook his head, still grinning. Sarah, you just don't get it, do you?" He leaned forward, the laughter gone, replaced by that familiar, venomous condescension. "Let me explain this to you one last time, in very small words. That charter? Those emails? They don't mean anything. They are props. The only thing that matters is the story we tell, and I tell the story. And the story is that I am the genius who delivered the Vanguard initiative. You," he said, pointing a finger at me, "are a functionary, a cog in the machine, a very efficient, well-paid cog, but a cog nonetheless." He stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. "You talk about logic and legality. You think you can come in here and lawyer me with your little folder? I am the law here. The bonus was discretionary, and I, in my discretion, decided you didn't deserve it. This conversation is over. Frankly, it's getting a little sad." My own breath was trapped in my lungs. My meticulously constructed argument, my appeal to reason and fairness, had been laughed out of the room. He turned back, his face a mask of finality. "You are an excellent implementer, Sarah, so go implement yourself back at your desk and do your job. Or don't. There are 1,000 other people who would kill for your unjust salary." I didn't even register myself standing up and walking out. My body moved on autopilot, my mind a white noise hiss of his laughter. I bypassed my desk, bypassed the elevators, and pushed through the heavy door into the emergency stairwell. The clanging slam of the door echoed the final, brutal shutting of a door in my own mind. I sank down onto the cold concrete steps, the smell of dust and stale air filling my lungs, and that's when the despair hit. It was a physical thing, a crushing weight that settled deep in my gut. He was right. I was a fool. I had played the game by the rules, believing in a meritocracy that simply didn't exist. I had spent 7 years building his kingdom, and he wouldn't even let me have the scraps from the table. What now? What could I possibly do? He held all the cards. I couldn't afford to sue him. Sterling and Finch's legal team would bleed me dry and salt the earth so I could never work in this city again. I couldn't quit. I had a mountain of student debt and a rent payment that made me nauseous every month. I was trapped. Utterly, completely trapped by the life I had so diligently built. His laughter echoed in my head, a soundtrack to my own powerlessness. He didn't just steal my money. He had shown me that my work, my sacrifice, my very identity as a competent professional was a joke to him. I wasn't a partner in success. I was the punchline. Sitting there on that gritty step, I felt something break. The good soldier, the loyal employee, the woman who believed in process and fairness, she died in that stairwell. And as the tears of rage and humiliation finally came, hot and silent, a new thought began to form in the ruins. It was cold and sharp and terrifying. He had told me the story. He had said he was the one who made the music. But every project manager knows, if you have enough data, you can change any story. And I had 7 years worth of data. The stairwell was my concrete tomb for all of 10 minutes. I let the despair wash over me, a filthy cold tide. I let his laughter echo until it was just a ringing in my ears. I cried until my eyes were raw and my throat was tight. And then I stopped. The tears dried, leaving my skin feeling tight. The sobs subsided, replaced by the steady, rhythmic beat of my own heart. The good soldier was dead, and in her place, a strategist was born. He was right about one thing. I was an excellent implementer. I took ideas and made them happen. Now I had a new idea, my own idea. I stood up, brushed the dust from my skirt, and walked out of the stairwell, my back straight. I walked past my desk and went straight to the small, windowless office that belonged to Brenda from accounting. She was an older woman, perpetually flustered and pathologically organized. She was also the keeper of all records, including personnel files and professional certifications. "Brenda, hi," I said, forcing a weary but pleasant smile. "Jonathan's in a mood. He wants me to double-check the renewal dates on all our senior staff's professional liability insurance and licenses for the annual audit. Can you give me access to the digital archive?" She peered at me over her spectacles. "He's doing that now? We just did it 6 months ago." "You know him," I said with a sigh that conveyed years of shared suffering under his reign. "He gets an idea in his head." Brenda nodded knowingly and typed a few commands. "You have access for the next hour. Don't mess up my filing system." Back at my desk, I didn't search for everyone. I searched for one person. Jonathan Sterling, AIA. His file was thin. He hadn't needed to submit continuing education credits for years. I clicked through the documents until I found it, a copy of his state architectural license. And right next to it, a scan of the final renewal notice from the state board. I stared at the expiration date. March 12th, 3 years ago. I remembered it clearly now. He'd tossed the notice on my desk. "I'm not paying for this anymore," he'd scoffed. "I pay other people to draw lines. I'm a visionary." He let it lapse. He wasn't a licensed architect anymore. Not in this state. The AIA after his name was a lie. My heart gave a single, hard thump. It was a data point, but I didn't know what it meant yet. I needed more. I spent the rest of the day performing my job with chilling precision. I answered emails. I updated timelines. I was a ghost in the machine. my calm unnerving my colleagues more than any outburst would have. I watched Jonathan leave for his long, gloating lunch. I knew he wouldn't be back for at least 3 hours. This was my window. His office was just as I'd left it, my pathetic little portfolio still sitting askew on his desk. I walked in, my purpose a cold, hard stone in my stomach. For 7 years, my job had been to anticipate his needs, to organize his chaos. I knew where he kept everything. The client files, the corporate accounts, the good scotch, and I knew about the drawer. In the bottom right of his mahogany credenza was a drawer he kept locked. He thought I didn't know about it. But 2 years ago, he'd lost the key on a business trip to Singapore and had called me in a panic at 4 a.m., demanding I get a locksmith to his office immediately. I'd done one better. I'd called the high-end furniture company that made the credenza and, using the serial number I had on file, gotten a replacement key messengered over. I'd ordered 2. I pulled the small, ornate key from the back of my own desk drawer and walked back to his office. The key slid into the lock with a soft, satisfying click. Inside wasn't anything as tawdry as I might have once imagined. It was just a single black, leather-bound journal, his black book, as I'd heard him jokingly call it once, the place he kept his real notes. My hands were steady as I opened it. The pages were filled with his arrogant, spiky handwriting. Notes on deals, reminders of favors owed, vicious little observations about clients and employees. It was a logbook of his ego. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning for project names, and then I found it. A private residential project from last year, the Dalton Residence. It was a small but prestigious vanity project he'd taken on personally. My eyes landed on a specific entry. It was dated 8 months ago. Dalton final sign-off. Miller quoted $8K for final stamp and seal. Ridiculous. Handled it myself. My name on the door, my stamp on the plans. Done. I stopped breathing. I read the line again. My stamp on the plans. He had used his architect's stamp, a stamp that was legally worthless, a stamp tied to a license that had been expired for over 2 years. It wasn't just an ethical breach, it was fraud. It was a flagrant violation of state law, the kind of thing the state architectural board existed to prevent. To them, he wasn't a visionary or a rainmaker. He was just an unlicensed individual illegally practicing architecture, exposing the firm to unimaginable liability and risking the public's safety. I didn't need a lawyer. I didn't need to argue about my contributions. The project charter, the emails, my folder of homework, they were all props, just like he said. But this was real. This little black book and the digital record of his lapsed license weren't a story he could spin. They were the raw data that could bring his entire empire crashing down. I took out my phone and, with hands that were now trembling ever so slightly, I took a picture of the entry. I took a picture of the cover of the book. Then I put the journal back, locked the drawer, and walked out of his office. He had told me I lacked the killer instinct. He was wrong. I just needed the right weapon, and he had handed it to me himself. The walk back to my desk was the longest of my life. Every step was deliberate, a measure of control against the electric current of adrenaline humming under my skin. The photos on my phone felt like they were burning a hole in my pocket, a radioactive secret. I sat down, my posture perfect, my face a mask of serene neutrality. My first move was to transfer the images. I uploaded them to a newly created, anonymously named cloud account, one not linked to any of my personal or professional details, then triple deleted the files from my phone's memory. The evidence was now an invisible ghost in the machine, waiting to be summoned. For the next 2 days, I was the model employee. I was the ghost of Sarah past, a perfect, hollowed-out version of the woman I used to be. I was a study in malicious compliance. When Jonathan barked for coffee, I fetched it, placing it on his desk with a quiet, "Here you are, Jonathan." When he threw a last-minute, nonsensical task my way, I completed it with chilling efficiency and emailed him the confirmation. I was a mirror, reflecting back the perfect image of the subservient implementer he so desperately needed me to be. He loved it. He saw my quiet diligence, not as the calm before the storm, but as the placid stillness of a defeated spirit. He thought his laughter in the office had broken me, that his final, cruel dismissal had put me back in my box. He was convinced he had won. The condescension in his voice softened into a kind of lazy, satisfied pity. He was a lion who had successfully terrorized a mouse back into its hole, and he was content. On Wednesday afternoon, I put a 90-minute block on my calendar labeled Off-Site Vendor Meeting. I walked out of the Sterling and Finch lobby and didn't look back. I took the subway 3 stops downtown and found a small, anonymous public plaza I'd never been to before. I bought a coffee from a cart, sat on a cold stone bench facing away from the foot traffic, and pulled out my phone. My heart wasn't pounding. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a profound and icy calm, the same feeling I got in the moments before a major project launch, when all the variables had been accounted for and all that was left was to press the button. I had the number saved, the Office of Professional Discipline for the State Architectural Board. I took a deep breath, the crisp autumn air doing little to warm the cold resolve in my chest, and I dialed. A tired-sounding woman answered. "State Board, how can I help you?" "Hello," I said, my voice even and professional. "I need to file a formal complaint regarding the unlicensed practice of architecture." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Okay, do you have the name of the individual?" "I do," I said. "His name is Jonathan Sterling, Sterling. I gave her the address of the firm. "And his license number, if you have it?" "Yes, it's 028841. My information suggests it expired on March 12th, 3 years ago, and was not renewed." I was a project manager reading from a status report. These were just facts, data points. "I see," the woman said, her voice a little more alert now. "And you have reason to believe he is continuing to practice?" "Yes. He has been acting as the architect of record on projects. Specifically, I have knowledge of his fraudulent use of an architectural stamp on the final plans for a private commission known as the Dalton Residence within the last year." More typing, a longer pause this time. "Fraudulent use of a stamp is a very serious allegation, ma'am." "I understand," I said. "I am also aware that as the sole principal of the firm Sterling and Finch, his lapsed license may invalidate the firm's certificate of authorization to provide architectural services and could potentially nullify their professional liability insurance." I let that hang in the air. I had done my homework. "I see," the woman repeated, her voice now tight with professional gravity. "We will be opening an investigation immediately. Can I get your name for the record?" "I'd prefer to remain anonymous," I said. "I'm simply a concerned party who believes the public's trust is at risk." "Understood. Thank you for bringing this to our attention." I ended the call and sat there for a moment, the phone heavy in my hand. The mechanism was set. The gears were turning. I had pulled the pin on a grenade and rolled it quietly into the center of his glass-walled kingdom. All I had to do now was walk away. When I got back to the office, he was just leaving for the day. He saw me by the elevators and stopped, a smug, indulgent smirk on his face. "Ah, Sarah," he said, adjusting the knot of his silk tie. "Good to see you're putting in the hours. Keep it up. It's a good look for you." He took a step closer, lowering his voice to that familiar, conspiratorial tone. "I'm glad you've come to your senses. It was getting a little sad there for a minute, with your little folder and all your feelings." He looked me up and down, his eyes full of dismissive triumph. He thought he was looking at a broken-down cog, polished up and put back in its place. "You finally accepted your role. It's for the best. Some people are just meant to follow orders." I met his gaze. The anger, the humiliation, the despair. It was all gone, burned away, and replaced by the cold, clean certainty of what was to come. I didn't say a word. I just let the corner of my mouth lift into the barest hint of a smile. He chuckled, interpreting it as the weary resignation of the defeated. "That's the spirit," he said, and then he turned and strode toward the exit, a king leaving his castle, completely unaware that his reign was already over. It took exactly 7 business days, an eternity and no time at all. For 7 days, I was a phantom. I glided through the office, a specter of perfect efficiency. My work was flawless. My demeanor was placid. I was the calm, quiet eye of a hurricane that only I knew was coming. Jonathan, for his part, basked in my supposed submission. He'd occasionally give me a pitying smirk or a patronizing pat on the shoulder. He thought he was the victor, admiring his trophy. He had no idea he was a dead man walking. The execution began on a Thursday morning. It was just after 10. I was at my desk, reviewing a budget reconciliation, when a man in a rumpled but clean gray suit approached reception. He wasn't a client. He didn't have the swagger or the expensive watch. He looked like every faceless government employee I'd ever had the misfortune of dealing with. Tired, methodical, and utterly unimpressed by the world. Our receptionist, a young woman named Chloe, buzzed my line. "Sarah, there's a Mr. Thorne here to see Jonathan. He's not on the calendar." "I'll be right there," I said, my voice perfectly even. I stood up, smoothed the front of my dress, and walked to the lobby. The cold, clean certainty I'd felt on that park bench had never left me. It was a block of ice in my chest. "Mr. Thorne?" I asked, extending a hand. "I'm Sarah Jenkins, Mr. Sterling's senior project manager. How can I help you?" He took my hand. His grip was firm, his eyes missing nothing. "Investigator Marcus Thorne, State Architectural Board, Office of Professional Discipline. I need to speak with Mr. Sterling." The word investigator hung in the air, a drop of poison in a glass of water. Chloe's eyes went wide. I kept my smile in place, a perfect porcelain mask. "Of course! Right this way." I led him down the hall to the glass-walled shrine. Jonathan was on the phone, his feet on his desk, laughing. He saw us approach and waved his hand dismissively, annoyed at the interruption. I opened the door without knocking. "Jonathan," I said, my voice cutting through his call. "This is Investigator Thorne from the State Architectural Board. He's here to see you." Jonathan's feet hit the floor with a thud. He ended his call abruptly. "I don't have an appointment," he snapped, his eyes narrowing at the unwelcome guest. "What is this?" Investigator Thorne stepped into the office, his presence seeming to shrink the cavernous room. He didn't look at the art or the view. He looked only at Jonathan. "Mr. Jonathan Sterling? My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm here regarding your architectural license. Number 028841. The change was immediate and glorious. A flicker of confusion crossed Jonathan's face, then a flash of something else. Fear, raw and pure. He swallowed, the sound audible in the sudden silence. My license? There must be a mistake. We show that your license expired 3 years ago, on March 12th, and was not renewed, Thorne continued, his voice a monotone drone of facts. Yet you continue to operate as the principal of an architectural firm. Jonathan's face was turning pale. He shot a desperate, venomous look at me. "My assistant handles the paperwork. It's a clerical error. She must have forgotten." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I was a statue, a silent witness. Thorne didn't even glance my way. "It's the licensee's responsibility, Mr. Sterling, not their assistant's." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "We have also received a formal complaint, with supporting evidence, that you fraudulently affixed a defunct architectural stamp to the final plans for a private project, the Dalton residence, approximately 8 months ago." That was it. That was the kill shot, the mention of the Black Book's secret. Jonathan's carefully constructed world fractured. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, sallow sheen. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The titan of industry, the rainmaker, was gone. In his place was a cornered, terrified man. "Who?" he finally choked out, his eyes darting wildly between me and Thorne. "Who told you that? It's a lie." "Our investigation is ongoing," Thorne said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But you should know, practicing architecture without a license is a Class E felony. Using a fraudulent stamp carries its own penalties. And of course, this calls into question the legality of your firm's certificate of authorization not to mention the validity of your professional liability insurance for every single project you've overseen for the last 3 years. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of an empire turning to dust. Every project, every client, every dollar, all of it was built on a foundation of fraud, and I had just handed the state the demolition charges. He stared at me then, his eyes wide with the dawning, horrific realization. He saw it all. He saw my quiet compliance, my unnerving calm, my faint smile in the hallway. He saw the trap, but only after the steel jaws had already snapped shut on his leg. "You," he whispered, the single word a mix of awe and pure hatred. I gave him nothing. My face was a blank page. I had implemented his destruction with the same dispassionate efficiency I had once used to manage his projects. Investigator Thorne cleared his throat. "Mr. Sterling, I think it's best we continue this conversation in private." I turned, my duty done. As I walked out of his office, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a quiet, profound sense of balance. The closing of a project, the final reconciliation of a budget. I had simply corrected a resource allocation error. He had told me I didn't deserve the money. He was right. I deserved so much more. And in the coming weeks, as his world unraveled and his lawyers scrambled to contain the fallout, he would offer me a settlement, a very generous one. The exact price of my silence, my testimony, my name staying out of the official record, $150,000. The music was indeed very good, a perfect funeral dirge. The call came on Saturday morning. I was in my apartment, sipping the first decent coffee I'd had in a week, looking out my window at a world that felt sharper and more vibrant than it had in years. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. I knew who it would be. "Sarah?" The voice was a ragged whisper, a hollowed-out echo of the booming arrogance I was used to. It was Jonathan. "Yes," I said, my voice as placid as a frozen lake. There was a long pause, filled with the sound of his shaky breathing. "Sarah, I need your help." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the warmth. "Help with what, Jonathan?" "Don't do this," he pleaded, the whisper cracking. "Please, you know what's happening. That man, Thorne, he was here for hours. The firm's lawyers are in a panic. They're talking about felonies, about invalidating our insurance, about notifying every client from the last 3 years. This is a catastrophe." "It does sound like a significant project management challenge," I said, my tone utterly neutral. "Fix it, Sarah," he begged, the word a pathetic little scrape. "You can fix this. You're the only one who knows how everything works. You can talk to them, tell them it was a mistake, a clerical error. We'll say you were responsible for the renewals, and you forgot. I'll make it worth your while. I'll give you the bonus, the full 150. Just make this go away." I almost laughed. The sheer, unmitigated gall. He was offering me my own money to take the fall for his felony. The good soldier was long dead, but even her ghost was offended. "No," I said simply. "No? What do you mean, no?" he sputtered, a flicker of his old self returning. "Sarah, you don't understand what's at stake here." "Oh, I think I do," I replied, my voice dropping, losing its pleasant veneer and taking on the cold, hard edge of a scalpel. "I understand that your career is over. I understand that any potential lawsuit from the Daltons for professional malpractice could bankrupt you personally. I understand that the damages from every client who realizes their project was overseen by a fraud could sink this firm so fast the wreckage will never be found. I understand everything, Jonathan. The question is, do you?" Silence. He was finally getting it. I wasn't the help. I was the judgment. "What do you want?" he finally whispered, defeated. "I'm glad you asked," I said, setting my coffee cup down. It was time to dictate the terms. "First, I'm resigning, effective immediately. You will not contest it. You will not contact me after this call, except through your lawyer to confirm the transaction." "Transaction?" "Yes, you're going to pay me the money you owe me, but let's not call it a bonus. A bonus is a reward for a job well done. This is something else. Let's call it a severance package, or better yet, let's call it a settlement to avoid further damages." Further damages? He asked, his voice trembling. What other damages? This was the moment, the final turn of the screw. When I was reviewing your records, I said, choosing my words with surgical precision, I found your notes on the Dalton residence to be quite illuminating. But you're a creature of habit, Jonathan. The Dalton job wasn't the first time you decided to handle it yourself, was it? The Kensington project? The year before? Your little black book is a testament to your pattern of behavior. I heard a sharp intake of breath, a strangled gasp. I had bluffed. There was no Kensington project entry. But his reaction told me everything I needed to know. There might as well have been. He had no idea what else I had found, what other photos I might have taken. To him, that black book was a landmine, and I was the only one with the map. Pay me my settlement, Jonathan, I said, my voice a cold, final whisper, and maybe I won't feel a civic duty to report the second violation, the one that establishes a clear and deliberate pattern of fraud. He made a sound that was half sob, half surrender. He was broken. The Titan was a terrified child, afraid of the monster under his bed, a monster he had created himself. How much? He choked out. I let the silence hang for a moment, let him feel the weight of his entire world resting on my next words. $150,000, I said. It's not a negotiation, it's not an offer, it's the cost of my silence. You will have your lawyer arrange a wire transfer for the full amount by Monday at noon. If I see $1 less, or if it is 1 minute late, Investigator Thorne gets a follow-up call with a fresh appendix for his report. This is the bill, Jonathan. For 7 years of my life. Pay it. I didn't wait for a reply. I ended the call and blocked his number. The project was complete. The final budget was reconciled. I picked up my coffee, the bitterness all gone, and watched the sun climb higher in the sky. The check was on its way. The notification on my phone screen was almost blindingly simple. Direct deposit received, $150,000. A quiet little ding that represented the loudest, most satisfying victory of my life. It arrived at 11:58 a.m. on Monday, 2 minutes ahead of schedule. I was sitting on a park bench, the same one where I had placed the call that detonated my old life, and I didn't even smile. I just took a deep breath, feeling a 7-year-old knot in my shoulders finally, fully release. It wasn't a prize, it wasn't a bonus, it was a debt paid in full. The final line item on a project I had closed. The music of Jonathan's funeral dirge played out in quiet, devastating movements over the next few months. I heard most of it through Brenda from accounting, who called me a week after I vanished. She spoke in a hushed, conspiratorial whisper. The state's investigation was just the beginning. Once the Dalton family's lawyers caught wind of the fraudulent stamp, they filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for professional malpractice. That was the first domino. When Sterling and Finch's liability insurance carrier learned the firm's principal had been unlicensed for 3 years, they declared the policy null and void, retroactively. Every client was a potential lawsuit, every project, a time bomb. The firm didn't just fail, it disintegrated. The partners who could cashed out and ran. The ones who couldn't declared bankruptcy. Jonathan lost everything. The corner office, the $1,000 shoes, the art, the reputation. I saw a photo of him online once, months later, coming out of a courthouse. He looked haggard, shrunken, a ghost haunting the ruins of a kingdom he thought was built on his genius, only to discover it was built on a lie I had exposed. He wasn't a titan or a rainmaker. He was just a man who had told one too many stories, who finally had to listen to one he couldn't control. As for me, that money wasn't a ticket to a life of luxury. It was a key. It unlocked the cage I had so diligently helped build around myself. The first thing I did was pay off my student loans in one glorious lump sum payment. The weight that lifted off my soul was more valuable than any dollar amount. I didn't look for another job. The idea of living by someone else's color-coded calendar made my skin crawl. Instead, I traveled. I bought a one-way ticket to Lisbon with no timeline. I spent my mornings in cafes, not because I had to be awake for a 7 a.m. call with Tokyo, but because I wanted to watch the sun hit the cobblestones. I read novels on the beach instead of budget reconciliations on a crowded train. I learned that my brain, freed from the constant hum of manufactured emergencies, was still sharp and hungry. It just craved different problems to solve, like navigating a new city's transit system, or ordering dinner in a language I barely knew. Jonathan told me I lacked vision, that my only talent was making him look good. He was wrong. My talent was seeing the entire system, every moving part, and understanding how one small, precise action could change the outcome of the entire project. For 7 years, I used that talent to build his empire. Now I was using it to build my own life. A smaller life, a quieter one, but one where I was the architect, the visionary, and the one who deserved every bit of the reward. He told me I didn't deserve it. That was the lie that started it all. He thought my worth was something he had the authority to grant or withhold. What I learned, sitting in that dusty stairwell, is that your value isn't determined by the person who signs your checks. It's determined by you. The hard part isn't earning it. It's having the courage to claim it when someone tries to steal it from you. This was my story of collecting a debt. There are a lot of ways to balance the books when they've been cooked. If you're interested in hearing more of them, you should probably make sure you're subscribed.